I'm with Elana Heideman from Israel Forever Foundation, and who's also a Holocaust educator. And we saw terrible scenes in Amsterdam on Thursday evening. Tell us what happened.
Well, after a Ajax Maccabi game, there were massive attacks, onslaught against the Israeli fans and the Jewish members in the community. It was a targeted attack where it was very calculated in terms of how these attacks happened. And many people were injured. It was a frightful, frightful situation happening on the eve of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, just in the same community where once, so many years ago, it feels like the same hatred came to life. So it was a major attack targeted against Jews and Israelis that actually was not only relegated to the attack on the fans, but has had multiple impact all over in many communities.
So the football fans, were they being provocative towards the people in Holland?
Listen,
Was this
yeah,
pre-planned?
football in general, we know that there are these hooligans. Yeah, sure. And it's at every game. And the previous, game that was a few nights earlier, I guess, in, I think, Paris Saint-Germain, or I'm not sure of the location, where they unfurled flags. And yes, there are hooligans in that world. Okay. But that does not enable the type of attack, the ramming, the running over, the kicking, and the beating of Jews openly in the streets. So it doesn't matter even if there were a few sports fans, which we again see in the news everywhere, again and again. But to equate it is a mistake, and it is a dangerous one. And people don't realize just how much they are excusing this Arab violence that is taking over our societies.
As a Holocaust educator, does it shock you to see the way Israelis were treated in Europe?
Unfortunately, I believe that our shock is giving way to always not being able to get the upper hand, take the next step. Am I shocked by it in a way? Yes, in a way, no, because I've been predicting this for years, that there is no way that the street is not going to explode, that there has been so many emotions fanned and flamed and so many networks established to allow for the infiltration of terror mentality amongst the open society. So, am I shocked? Again, I'm shocked actually more by the reaction. The following morning, there were chants in the streets of Amsterdam by, shall we say, a very multicultural representation, and they were chanting Free Palestine, as if this motto, this concept that is totally warped, is justification for beating Jews in the streets. And again, we've seen this before. People are throwing accusations left and right over the use of the appropriate term, Nazi, Hitler, etc. But you have to notice these patterns where the shock needs to come from how many people in general society are willing to allow this, to stand up for it, to defend it, not recognizing the patterns of history that they need to be seeing.
You've already mentioned how close it is to Kristallnacht. What is Kristallnacht?
Kristallnacht was the night of broken glass, November 9th and 10th, in the middle of the night. They went and they smashed Jewish businesses and burned synagogues to the ground. They targeted and attacked Jews all throughout the streets and in private homes and private property. There were almost 1,000 Jews who were murdered that night. There were uncountable attacks, physical rapes, attempted murders, and this was a true shift in the understanding of the physicality of the hate that had been festering within this society for already over a decade. This physical expression, Kristallnacht, this night of broken glass, it brought about a visual manifestation, a physical one, and it created a deeper segment in society. There were a lot of Germans who basically went silently onward with their lives. And there were 33,000 Jews who were arrested that night and sent to concentration camps. That element of the experience, many people do not even understand, that Kristallnacht the breaking of the glass and the shattering of the glass, and then forcing the Jews into the streets the next day in order to clean them up, and starting to march them through the streets wearing placards and signs. Now, those types of humiliation had already been in place since 1935. But when Kristallnacht was a physical expression, this was a change. People were actively taking part. There are even stories of locals taking part in these actions. And so the coincidence, the shock, shall we say, of Amsterdam takes place in these same societies where it has festered year after year and has never really been understood by the majority of society as a turning point, as it needs to be. So this is a night that many people choose to take part in a memorial program of some kind sometimes, to talk about bystanderism. We see that not only in Amsterdam, but there were several other attacks that happened in the last few days. They did not get the news, and yet each one is always blamed on the Jews. So you have students attacked on campus, you have children being attacked publicly in the street. There was an attempted kidnapping of a Jewish child in a street in New York. There have been attempted stranglings at protests. There have been countless attacks against Jews. But the bystanderism is one of the biggest elements of the enabling that is happening to the societies that are trying to bring about another genocide against the Jews. And they're doing so by claiming the Jews are the problem, by claiming the Jews committed genocide. In the days of Aryanism, you had the idea that the Jew was infiltrating the society and they were poisoning the society, and we were the threat to society. And the Jews were to blame for any suffering that may befall them. There are leaders who have these statements. The Jews are responsible for anything that might befall them. Again and again, the Jews are accused. On Kristallnacht, before Kristallnacht, and since Kristallnacht. We have been accused for October 7th. We have been accused for everything. And only when the world will wake up to see the pattern will they understand that you can do better. You can know more. And you cannot fall for the same tricks of history.
And this morning, Jerusalem Post was reporting that Free Palestine stickers with razor blades found outside an Amsterdam Holocaust museum. This isn't just demonstration, is it? This is actual hatred.
Actual hatred. It is beyond hatred. This is a thirst for blood. This is a thirst for blood, a society that is built on it. And when I say society, we usually think of a locale. But no, this is an entire realm of the humanity of the world that has become so obsessed with this hatred, the same hatred that, as we've learned from, throughout history, the longest hatred in the world, and the way that it infects from the inside. It can eat at somebody and it justifies any act. That is what we are seeing happen today. So this hatred of the razor blades with Free Palestine is the catch language. This is the way to get them in. There is a Nazi poster that had been put up that shows a strong, blonde, Aryan man, and he's handing out to the masses. Yeah, he's got his hands out and he's giving here the strength. You can see it in the caricatures of Nazi propaganda. This was one of the early ones that garnered interest, and the message written on it was Arbeit und Brot, work and bread, a positive message that allowed them to infiltrate the mind and say, with us, you're doing good. And even though their manifesto since 1920 indicated the elimination of the Jew, people joined. People were on fire from their hate. It took 18 years before Kristallnacht took place. Amsterdam is one of, and I'm sorry to say, but one of many such incidents that will likely start to happen. I believe very strongly that we need to be aware of the patterns that were used in their behavior. They messaged openly on Snapchat. We have their Facebook and WhatsApp conversations, or whatever platforms they were pulled from, possibly Telegram. We know that there was a targeted assault, and there were groups waiting for them in 5 to 15 individuals at each entrance, because of course the Israeli fans are, concentrated to a certain area for their own safety. I mean, everybody understands the kind of soccer world you're living in, right? Yes, there are hooligans. Yes, there are bad seeds amongst the Jews and the Israelis, but under no circumstance does that allow for an organized, systematic assault. They went to hotels where they knew the Israelis were staying. They fired fireworks into the hotel windows. They stormed the lobbies. They had a network of Uber drivers and others. And the Israelis were ordering these cabs. And so then the cab drivers would be able to tell the terrorists, and that's what we must call them. Everyone must recognize this Free Palestine is nothing but a terrorist movement. And they can tell you that Israel is a terror state, but it is manipulation, lies, it is misdirection. And we must be smarter. We must be more strategic, and we must understand their patterns are obvious, and we are not doing enough to recognize and therefore prevent. Now, allow me to say, sorry, I got to interject. We are doing enough to recognize, and we are reporting. Israel let the Dutch authorities know that they had information, legitimate information on a planned assault. And even during the pogrom itself, the police stood idly by. We even have evidence, apparently, that there were some who were involved, because over the decade of open borders and the migration, you see this jihadism infiltrating everywhere around you, every workplace. Israelis found refuge in a bar, only to later learning that that bar owner was a part of it. Everything was organized, and they are much more organized than the world of bystanders who believe that the war against the Jews is not their war. And indifference out of desire to just live your simple life is threatening the world. Jewish lives matter, as cliche as it sounds. But we have to recognize just how important this hate that you ask of, this is beyond just the term hate. This is so deep, and we can all do more to try and stop its flow.
Has there been a good response from the Israeli government? Like bringing people home? We do see that there was 2,000 citizens.
A response to Amsterdam in particular has been really immediate and phenomenal, and an important example of how Israel's existence is essential for the future of Jewish existence. We were able to coordinate. At first, planes were being prepared to fly to Amsterdam and rescue all of the Israelis who had been stranded. But in the end, they worked with the companies that were already on the ground and the protocols in place so that they would be able to be brought over to Israel by El Al and other airlines. What was really, they couldn't get cabs, they couldn't coordinate the landing of the Israeli rescue planes, apparently, in Holland. They weren't allowing it. So there's all this bureaucracy and protocol that seems to very often inhibit how Israel could have saved maybe sooner. People were stranded for many hours. You should see, however, the videos from inside the airplanes, and everybody's singing and joyful because, my gosh, they were saved. However, the response is also, of course, evoked some ire amongst Israelis who say, if we can save the Jews from Amsterdam, why can't we save our hostages? And I want to remind listeners that we can't make this kind of equation because there are very different situations, but we see it already spreading through social media, along with, as I mentioned, the lies that it was initiated by hooligans amongst Israelis. They tore down a Palestinian flag. Israeli flags are burned everywhere in open, free societies in Canada, in America, in England, and in France. So an Israeli tears down a single Palestinian flag and it makes the news as if, okay, therefore we can kill them all, because that is really what the world is saying by their silence.
Will what happened in Amsterdam mean that Israelis will fear to travel abroad, perhaps hide their Jewishness?
When it comes to Israel's response, one of the things it did issue was recommendations for how to avoid drawing attention to yourself as an Israeli. And The idea to Israelis of hiding one's identity is very foreign. Israelis in general are very proud. We're a strong nation. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We know the lies are lies. We're confident in the integrity of our country, regardless of whether or not, we love a politician or we love everything. We know that the lies are lies. So when we go out into the world, Israelis feel like it's a pride. It's, who I am. The idea that Israel's reaction included telling Israelis to hide their identity probably was a bit of a shock to those people. For the first time ever, they'd have to actually figure out. In some of them, if you've seen the videos, people who are saying, I'm not a Jew, being beaten and kicked on the ground, lying about their identity. So do I think that it's going to impact? Yeah, everyone. Every Israeli and every Jew, is questioning right now, where can I go that I can feel safe? And I think, honestly, we have to think, who will help me when I'm there? We know the stories of the Chabad rabbis and the local community that did so much to help the Jews who were attacked. They refused, by the way, medical care from the local community because they couldn't be trusted. And this happened on a Thursday night. And so then we go into Shabbat and you think to yourself, how does one go into Shabbat and feel the blessing and the curse that it is to be a Jew? I think that, people will question their behavior, but they will also be empowered to do more, to not ignore the anti-Semitism around the world. And I think it's important that Jews everywhere recognize it's not just Israelis. It's just an attempt to divide us. And I hope that Christians around the world wake up and say, we have to do everything to quash this brainwashing of our societies that this behavior is legitimate.
The Holocaust is a dark time in European history. We're hearing genocide calls, protests, and anti-Semitism rising. Have we actually learned a lesson?
No, we have not. I do believe we have learned some small lessons that have yet to be applied. I think that there are people who could do more, say more, but are inhibited by fear of losing their job, fear of for their family. I think that people are quick to make humor over the kinds of exaggerated accusations that have been made. So, for example, the American satire show Saturday Night Live did something where they again equated Trump with Hitler. And you think to yourself, it's sad that this is the deterioration of the intelligence of our world, that we have to so quickly demonize, even in our fight against terror. It is a fine line to walk, to not demonize all Muslims, not demonize all Arabs. And the Abraham Accords that actually Trump himself brought about with Bibi Netanyahu, two of the apparently least liked leaders, but, I think evidence might just prove otherwise, because a leader is somebody who has to tackle the issues that nobody else could tackle. And the leadership of the local societies is that's where the real problems are, where they're unable, even in Amsterdam, New York, LA, Chicago, South Africa communities, Australian communities, you name them, throughout Europe. If they cannot control them, why is it that there's only this one person who is being demonized for his actions? So I think that it's just important that we try to predict a little bit better, and therefore we'll all be less shocked and more prepared.
What is your prayer for Israel and anti-Semitism at this time?
A lot of people pray, we'll find an end to the anti-Semitism. I'm a little bit more realistic. I think that we need to find a beginning for empowering the people to do what needs to be done, to speak out and be a part of that shift, as I've described, getting involved in councils and educational places. It requires a lot of work because their numbers are bigger. I would hope that we could figure out a way to circumvent the numbers of the people and use smarter ways to achieve power and control over these dangerous tyrannic elements that are growing. My prayer would be that each person find one thing that they could do every day. One little thing. And a lot of people say, okay, I'm just going to, spend it on social media and share and like, but those are things. And reporting the lies, those are things. Finding a fellow virtual citizen of Israel, for those of you who are part of our global community at Israel Forever, our vision is that you are the army that will stop the next growth of much further than just Amsterdam on October 7th. We are being shown, as it says, we are being shown, told by the enemy what they are going to do, and they are starting to do it. My prayer is that people will be more aware of secretive behavior amongst their neighbors, trying to understand maybe there is such a thing to, people who would take part in such a pogrom so easily in a different community. There are apparently somebody who took part in Amsterdam's pogrom and Amsterdam's riot, and I want to just specify pogrom is a term that was created to refer to the government-sponsored riots targeting Jewish communities, meaning they turned a blind eye and allowed the society to unleash their terror on the Jews. Nowadays, it's been twisted and distorted to different things, but this is a good example of that societal upheaval with permissiveness by a silent police force, a silent security force. So my prayer would be that you check your security forces and you create the alliances so that these things do not happen. Apparently, some of the police were actively, maybe not taking part, but actively involved. Again, the messaging is out there. We have the evidence. That's why Israel's genius. Israel's reaction, wow, aren't we lucky? We have Israel. So my prayer would also be appreciate Israel, teach respect for Israel, join Israel, be a part of this destiny that we are living. We are living it out. And we are fighting this war, our war on the northern border, our war on the southern border. We are in Judea and Samaria. We are going and uprooting the terror, and you must do it in your societies. So I pray that there shall be strength for everyone as we face this next chapter.
You're a Holocaust educator. What is your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
Oh, IsraelForever.org is my website and my organization that I have built over the years with the guidance and the wisdom of my mentor, Elie Wiesel. I have spent my life as a Holocaust educator from a very young age, and I continue to channel the lessons of the Holocaust into expressions of modern day understanding, whether that is through connection to Israel or Jewish history and identity as a whole. Israel Forever is a space where people can come, learn, engage, have activities, and be a part of a global community of virtual citizens of Israel, people who feel themselves at one with this nation. Righteous among the nations, welcome to join. Come and follow on Instagram and on Facebook. And yes, you are welcome to bring me to talk to your community. I have a great podcast, Jew Today, and we are doing everything we can to empower and inspire. And I'm so, so grateful for the opportunity to share Israel Forever with you. And Paul, always such a pleasure to talk with you and to hear your insights as well.
Elana, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you so much.